In today's video, my 6 rules on how to control hunger. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com. In today's video, I got a great question. A gentleman reached out to me on Instagram, direct message. I'll put it on the screen here. If you have a question for me, you can go there and send me your question. But the question was basically about his hunger. So what I'd like to do is read you the question and we can get into my 6 rules and a few little bonus rules that I have on how I control hunger when I'm trying to go from this to this. Yeah, it's all about fat loss when we're controlling our hunger, guys. Or perhaps it's just about avoiding weight gain. And if you like this type of content around the science, the evidence-based, the coach-based approach to reaching the physique of your dreams, hit subscribe. It's what I love to do here. For some time now, it's been hard for me to keep on my diet because I have seizures and eat everything I have at hand. I eat 6 meals a day. I get up at 5 a.m., eat my first meal at 8 a.m., and then every 3 to 4 hours. Based on wholesome products. I eat about 800 grams of vegetables a day. I often think about the next meal, and sometimes I can't stop myself and eat huge amounts of calories from cookies. Are there any methods to suppress the appetite? Thanks. The first thing we got to understand about appetite is, where does it come from? Why do we get hungry? And if you understand sometimes the science behind it, then it can help you understand how to respond and respond appropriately to reduce it. So where does hunger come from? Well, it essentially comes from the hypothalamus, which is in our brains, something that people much smarter than myself figured out a long time ago. And what we got to do is control our blood sugar, right? Our blood sugar kind of determines when we get those hunger signals. And so you'll often hear people say not to have sugar and carbohydrates because it spikes the insulin. Well, insulin isn't all bad, okay? Insulin is going to drive our calories and have them stored as fuel, either in the form of body fat, or for those of us that like to lift some weights and do some endurance type training, it'll help shuttle that carbohydrate into the muscle. Okay, so insulin isn't all bad. But my first rule that I want to tell you guys when it comes to eating is how to blunt that response. You'll often hear people talk about foods that are high in the glycemic index, meaning blood sugar responds really poorly to them because they spike it so quickly. Well, if you follow rule number 1, it will help with your hunger. And that is, when you're sitting down to a meal, eat your protein first. That's right. Protein is the slowest digesting macronutrient. It requires the most work for our bodies to break it down. So rule number 1, sit down at your meals, eat your lean protein source first. Now, rule number 2 that I'm going to give you for how to control your hunger is something that I didn't even realize I was doing until I started tracking my macronutrients. So if you're not tracking macronutrients, so if you have no idea where to start, I have a free guide to download that will give you things like diet advice. It'll give you nutrition training, and you'll understand things on a higher level. Now, when I started doing this one thing, tracking macronutrients, what I realized was I was drinking a lot of my calories. So rule number 2 is pretty simple. Don't drink your calories. Now, that usually comes in the form of things like sodas and juices. If you're using like a protein shake, especially a vegan protein shake, which is plant-based, well, that might actually be something that digests a little bit slower. But avoiding drinking calories is a great general rule to avoid hunger. Now, the next rule is something that I typically focus on with my physique athletes. You see, I coach people that get on the bodybuilding stage, and we have a team of coaches here at Pro Physique that coach people across all spectrum of goals. And while we focus on macronutrient goals, a real basic guideline for you, and rule number 3, is to get 30 to 40% of your total calorie intake per day in the form of protein. Protein is going to help keep you full. It's going to help you avoid snacking. It's going to help control blood sugar. And if you do anything like sports or resistance train and you want some more muscle, well, it's going to improve that too. Now, rule number 4 is not something that I was always good at, and that is to get fiber with every meal. You see, fiber is slower digesting. It actually breaks down in a different part of the intestines, so it really controls blood sugar. You'll see foods that are very low on the glycemic index are typically very high in fiber. And if you add a little bit of fiber to each meal, it's also going to help digestion and the breakdown of the higher protein diet that you're taking in. A lot of people will say, that's great, Paul, but how the hell do we get fiber in? Well, I don't want you drinking Metamucil. No, I want you to find some foods that you'll enjoy. And you'll often hear people say that fruit is a terrible idea when trying to lose body fat. If you include fruit with every meal, you'll get something for your sweet tooth. You'll also get a little bit of fiber, and it'll help you digest and stay full longer. So what are the sources of fiber that I like to use? Well, typically I'll wake up every day, have a banana, an apple, A great one is strawberries. Strawberries have a ton of fiber per carbohydrate. Other popular ones include quinoa, oats or oatmeal, and one of my favorites that I use for a snack would be something like air popped popcorn, which is very low calorie and has a great amount of fiber. And this leads me to a sub rule. So although rule number 4 is about fiber, the real reason that that has value is because if you're really worried about controlling hunger, volume is king. That's right, choosing foods that have higher volume, that are going to fill the stomach. The reason that foods that are higher in sugar and higher in fat are kind of considered unhealthy is because you can digest them very quickly and you'll still be hungry. So if you increase food volume through higher protein, higher fiber sources, well, you're less likely to be hungry. So rule number 5 is a pretty basic one that I think all of us know about, but we kind of underestimate its importance, and that is to get more than 6 hours of sleep per night. Now, 6 hours is a baseline number. I myself really struggle if I get less than 7.5. Now, I'm also 45 years old, so I've figured some things out in my life, and I know my sweet spot. If I get too little sleep, I really struggle the next day, but I'll actually link a study below that shows hunger increased in a group of people that got less than 6 hours of sleep. So if we can do things like getting enough sleep and reducing our stress, that's gonna really go a long way in keeping our hunger in check. And another great way, well, rule number 6, I'm in a gym, you guessed it. I'm gonna say do some form of exercise every day. I don't care if it's going for a walk, I don't care if it's power squatting 350 pounds, whatever gets you jacked up and something you enjoy. Play with your kids, go outside, do something with your friends. Getting some form of exercise every day is going to go a long way in controlling blood sugar. And although it might seem counterintuitive, I found some great research in a video I did recently that showed that people that exercise actually suppress their appetite more. So this is certainly something that we can do to focus on appetite suppression, because I think a lot of us assume that if we move more, we're going to be hungrier. And if we're struggling with hunger already, well, that might not be a good idea. But if you can get your sleep and stress under control, and this is something that exercise has been shown to do, you exercise, you sleep better, your stress is lower, your cortisol is lower, therefore you're less hungry, less likely to store extra body fat. And I'll give you one final rule, because these are my top 6, but something that I find that I do, which, you know, for people that aren't trying to get absolutely shredded, when we're getting below 10% body fat, and when I'm getting close to 5% body fat before I get on stage, our fat cells produce leptin, and leptin is something that when it's in short supply, we find we're very hungry. So something I end up doing towards the end of my fat loss phases where I'm very lean is I start to take in a little bit more caffeine. You know, things like coffee, things like energy drinks that have 0 calories can really help abate hunger, because sometimes, depending on your goal, you just have to deal with hunger. And the psychology of that tells us we have to avoid it if we want to be productive. We can't just think about our food all day. And so it also goes without saying that a busy mind helps. So if you're thinking about food, that means you're not thinking about other things. So if you find something that you enjoy, something that occupies your mind, well, I've gone many, many hours past my normal eating window when I'm anxious or when I'm focused or when I'm in the zone at work. So hopefully all these tips help you guys out, and I hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.